Good evening. Tonight we're diving headfirst into a topic that's as old as time and honestly as uncomfortable as finding out your grandpa shares minion memes unironically. Today we're counting down the top 10 governments that use religion to manipulate the poor. Yes, that's right. We're talking about the unholy alliance between state power and divine authority. A partnership that often results in the most vulnerable people getting royally, and I mean biblically, screwed over. It's a tale as old as Scripture itself. Leaders realizing that if you can convince people you have God on your side, you can get away with almost anything. This isn't just about politicians awkwardly quoting Scripture to seem relatable. It's about a systematic, calculated strategy. It's about leveraging faith, something deeply personal and profound, as a tool for social control. The impact is devastating. It creates a system where questioning the government becomes tantamount to questioning God, where poverty is framed not as a policy failure, but as a divine test or a moral failing. This manipulation stifles dissent, justifies inequality, and keeps millions trapped in a cycle of poverty. All while the powerful wrap themselves in a cloak of piety. So, get ready for a world tour of state-sponsored sanctity, where heavenly mandates are used for some very earthly and often very ugly political goals. We'll be looking at how this plays out across different faiths and continents because, let's be clear, no single religion has a monopoly on being co-opted by opportunistic governments. From theocracies to so-called secular democracies, the playbook is remarkably similar. It's a grim subject, yes, but an absolutely vital one to understand. So grab your sacramental wine or whatever gets you through these things, because this is going to be, well, it's going to be something. Kicking off our list at number 10 is the Islamic Republic of Iran, a country where the separation of church and state is not so much a blurry line as it is a non-existent mythological creature, like a griffin or a fiscally responsible government project. Since the 1979 revolution, Iran has been a theocracy, meaning the government's authority is derived directly from God, which is, to put it mildly, a fantastic way to avoid accountability. The entire system is built around the concept of Vilayat-e Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. This essentially means the supreme leader, currently Ayatollah Khamenei, has the final say on everything, and I mean everything. His authority is presented as a religious obligation, a divine mandate. For the nation's poor, this is an incredibly powerful tool of control. When economic conditions are dire, when sanctions bite and unemployment soars, the government doesn't have to answer with effective economic policy. Instead, it can frame suffering as a test of faith, a necessary sacrifice in the struggle against the great Satan, which is, of course, us. Convenient, isn't it? Imagine being told that your empty pantry is not the result of corruption or mismanagement, but a noble part of a holy war. It's a narrative that redirects righteous anger away from the government and towards external enemies or internal moral deviance. The state uses its vast propaganda machine, state-run television, Friday sermons, and the Basij militia to constantly reinforce this message. These institutions drill into the populace, especially in poorer, more rural areas, that loyalty to the regime is synonymous with loyalty to Shia Islam itself. This creates a brutal catch-22 for the impoverished. If you protest for better living conditions, you're not just a dissident, you're a bad Muslim. You're ungrateful for the divine protection the Islamic Republic supposedly provides. This religious justification is also used to fund ventures like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its foreign interventions. While the poor struggle to make ends meet, vast sums of money are funneled into defending the faith abroad, a classic case of prioritizing ideological purity over the well-being of your own citizens. So in Iran, religion isn't just a part of the government. It is the government's ultimate shield. It's a divine get-out-of-jail-free card for any and all policy failures. It allows the ruling clerics to maintain a lavish lifestyle and an iron grip on power, all while telling the poor that their suffering is not only necessary, but holy. It's a masterclass in manipulation, turning the very source of spiritual comfort for many into an instrument of their own oppression. And for that, Iran, you have earned your spot at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a country that makes Iran look like a freewheeling, libertine paradise. If you've ever thought, you know what my country needs? More rules enforced by men with beards who can beat me with a stick for not praying on time, then congratulations. You've just invented the Saudi religious police. The entire state is built on an alliance between the ruling house of Saud and the clerical establishment of Wahhabism, an ultra-conservative, puritanical interpretation of Islam. This partnership is the bedrock of the kingdom's social contract. The House of Saud gets the religious legitimacy it needs to rule as an absolute monarchy, and the Wahhabi clerics get to enforce their strict moral code on every single person in the country. For the poor, this system is particularly suffocating. The state's immense oil wealth is concentrated in the hands of the royal family and their cronies, while a significant portion of the population relies on state handouts and low-wage jobs. The system is designed to keep them dependent and, crucially, compliant. And how do you ensure compliance? With the Mutaween, or the Committee for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice. For decades, these were the guys roaming the streets, making sure shops closed for prayer, women were properly covered, and there was no immoral mingling of the sexes. While their powers have been officially curbed recently as part of a PR-friendly modernization effort, the underlying principle remains. Social order is maintained through the threat of religious sanction. For the poor, who have little social or economic capital, stepping out of line is a risk they can ill afford. This religious framework is also used to justify the kafala system, a sponsorship system for migrant workers that has been described as modern-day slavery. Millions of poor workers from South Asia and Africa are tied to their employers, with their passports often confiscated. The system is upheld by a social and religious hierarchy that places Saudi citizens above foreigners, creating a permanent underclass with few rights. The state uses its religious authority to gloss over this brutal exploitation, framing the kingdom as the holy custodian of Islam, a benevolent provider that deserves unquestioning loyalty. Ultimately, in Saudi Arabia, religion is the ultimate tool of social engineering. It dictates every aspect of public life and provides the justification for a deeply unequal society. The poor are kept in line not just by economic dependency, but by a pervasive state-enforced piety that equates obedience to the king with obedience to God. It's a system that ensures the rich stay rich and the poor stay quiet, all under the watchful eye of a government that has appointed itself as the sole arbiter of morality. It's a holy smokescreen for a system of profound control. At number 8, we journey to the world's largest democracy, India, where democracy has recently been served with a generous helping of religious nationalism, and the taste is, let's say, aggressively spicy. The political landscape has been dramatically reshaped by the rise of Hindutva, or Hindu nationalism, an ideology that seeks to define Indian identity as being inseparable from the Hindu faith. This has been the primary political tool of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP. Now on the surface, this might sound like a simple appeal to the majority faith, but it's far more insidious than that. Hindutva is used to create a powerful US versus them narrative. The US are the Hindus, portrayed as the original authentic people of India. The them? That would be India's religious minorities, particularly its 200 million Muslims, who are often painted as foreign invaders or a disloyal fifth column. This rhetoric is incredibly effective at distracting from real, pressing issues. Why worry about unemployment or failing infrastructure when you can worry about the demographic threat of your neighbors? For India's vast population of poor and lower-income Hindus, this message is potent. It offers a sense of identity, pride, and superiority that transcends their economic circumstances. The BJP has masterfully woven religious fervor with populist welfare schemes, so you get a bag of government-subsidized rice, and you're also told that your faith is under threat, and only this government can protect it. It's a brilliant political strategy. Address material needs just enough to secure votes, while redirecting deeper frustrations towards a common enemy. This has real, violent consequences. The rhetoric from the top has emboldened extremist groups, leading to lynchings over accusations of cow slaughter, cows being sacred in Hinduism, and riots that disproportionately affect poor Muslim communities. Discriminatory laws like the Citizenship Amendment Act have been passed, explicitly using religion as a criterion for citizenship and stoking fears among India's Muslim population. The government uses religious festivals and symbols as massive political rallies, blurring the line between state and party, faith and politics. So in India, we see a government using the deep-seated faith of hundreds of millions of people as a political battering ram. It consolidates power by turning religious identity into the primary political identity, overriding class, caste, and regional concerns. It provides the poor with a powerful, intoxicating cocktail of religious pride and nationalist fervor, all while the fundamental issues that keep them poor, systemic inequality, corruption, and crony capitalism, are conveniently swept under the saffron-colored rug. It's a textbook case of divide, distract, and rule. Our next stop, at number 7, is India's neighbor and rival, Pakistan, a nation founded as a homeland for the Muslims of the subcontinent. If India is currently grappling with the rise of Hindu nationalism, Pakistan has been steeped in political Islam since its inception, and the results have been, to put it charitably, a mixed bag. And by mixed bag, I mean a bag that is on fire. The state has long used a specific and particularly vicious tool to control its populace, the blasphemy laws. On paper, these laws are meant to protect religious sentiments, primarily those of the Sunni Muslim majority. In practice, they are a weapon used to settle personal scores, to grab land, and most importantly for our topic, to suppress the poor and marginalized. The laws are vaguely worded and carry a mandatory death penalty for insulting the Prophet Muhammad. The mere accusation of blasphemy is often enough to incite a lynch mob, with the police either unable or unwilling to intervene. Now, how does this control the poor? Imagine you're a poor Christian tenant farmer who has a dispute with your wealthy Muslim landlord over wages. All that landlord has to do is accuse you of blasphemy. Suddenly, your fight for a fair wage is transformed into a capital crime against Islam. The entire community turns against you, your life is in danger, and your family is forced to flee. This threat hangs like the sword of Damocles over the heads of Pakistan's religious minorities, and even over poor Muslims who fall foul of the powerful. The state, for its part, has consistently failed to reform these laws, despite international condemnation. Why? Because religious rhetoric is the currency of Pakistani politics. Politicians across the spectrum, including those who are supposedly secular, engage in a constant game of one-upmanship to prove who is the better defender of the faith. To be seen as soft on blasphemy is political suicide. This creates a climate of fear where even discussing the laws is dangerous, effectively silencing any and all dissent. This manipulation extends beyond just the blasphemy laws. The state and the powerful military establishment have historically nurtured and weaponized extremist groups for their own strategic ends, both at home and abroad. This has flooded the country with a hyper-conservative religious ideology that disproportionately affects the poor, who have less access to alternative sources of education and information. The poor are told that their poverty is a test from Allah, and that their duty is to defend the honor of Islam, a narrative that conveniently keeps them from demanding things like jobs, healthcare, or justice. It's a cynical, deadly game, and in Pakistan, the poor are always the ones who lose. All right, for number 6, we're taking a detour to the smallest sovereign state in the world, Vatican City. Now, I know what you're thinking, John. The Vatican doesn't have a poor population to manipulate. Its population is mostly celibate men in elaborate hats. And you're right. But the Vatican's influence isn't about controlling the 800 people who live there. It's about the immense power the Holy See wields over 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide, a significant number of whom live in poverty in the developing world. The Catholic Church is, at its heart, a top-down institution. The Pope, ruling from the Vatican, sets the doctrine that is followed by bishops, priests, and laypeople across the globe. This doctrine isn't just about how to pray, it has profound, real-world implications for the poor. For decades, the Church's staunch opposition to all forms of artificial contraception has been a key example. In many impoverished countries in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, this isn't an abstract theological debate. It's a matter of life and death. Local religious leaders, following Vatican doctrine, preach against the use of condoms. This has had a demonstrable and devastating impact on the fight against HIV and AIDS, and has contributed to high birth rates in regions where families are already struggling to feed the children they have. The Church frames this as a moral imperative, a defense of the sanctity of life. But for a poor family, it means more mouths to feed, less opportunity for education, and a greater risk of disease. It perpetuates the cycle of poverty under the guise of divine law. Furthermore, the Church's influence on politics in heavily Catholic countries can be immense. It often aligns itself with conservative political forces that oppose social safety nets, workers' rights, and wealth redistribution, framing these as steps towards godless socialism. The Church's vast network of schools and charities, while doing undeniable good in many cases, also serves as a powerful tool for indoctrination, ensuring that future generations are raised with a worldview that aligns with the Vatican's conservative social and economic principles. So while Vatican City itself doesn't directly govern a poor population, its policies, issued as infallible religious truths, have a massive impact on the lives of the world's poorest Catholics. It leverages its spiritual authority to influence deeply personal decisions and national policies in ways that can trap the vulnerable in poverty. It's a unique form of remote control, where doctrines formulated in a gilded European city-state create profound hardship in a slum in Manila or a village in Uganda. It's manipulation on a global scale, and it's more than earned its place on this list. Halfway through our list, at number 5, we arrive in Myanmar, a country that shatters the Western stereotype of Buddhism as an exclusively peaceful, meditative practice. Here, a militant, nationalist form of the faith has been weaponized by the state, particularly by the military junta, to justify what can only be described as genocide. The primary targets of this campaign have been the Rohingya, a Muslim minority group living in a predominantly Buddhist country. For decades, the government of Myanmar has systematically denied the Rohingya citizenship, rights, and basic human dignity. They have been framed as illegal Bengali immigrants, as a foreign contagion threatening the Buddhist character of the nation. This narrative has been aggressively promoted by nationalist monks, most famously the monk Ashin Wirathu, who was dubbed the face of Buddhist terror. These religious figures work hand in glove with the military, providing the moral and spiritual justification for their brutal actions. This is a classic case of using religion to create a scapegoat. Myanmar is a poor country, with a long history of brutal military rule and civil war. By focusing national rage on the Rohingya, the government and military can distract the majority Bamar population from their own economic struggles and lack of freedom. It's a powerful message. You may be poor, but at least you are not them. You are a true defender of the faith, and your duty is to protect the nation from these outsiders. This ideology has been drilled into the population through sermons, social media, and state-backed propaganda. It has poisoned communities, turning neighbors against each other. When the military launched its clearance operations in 2017, burning villages, committing mass murder and rape, and driving over 700,000 Rohingya into neighboring Bangladesh, many in Myanmar cheered them on. They had been convinced by their government and their religious leaders that this was not a crime against humanity, but a necessary act of national and religious purification. Even for poor Buddhists who aren't actively participating in the violence, this system enforces conformity. Speaking out in defense of the Rohingya is not just politically dangerous. It's portrayed as an act of religious betrayal. You risk being branded a traitor to your faith and your people. So, in Myanmar, the government has taken the teachings of peace and compassion and twisted them into a sword. It uses Buddhism to unite the poor majority against a desperately poor minority, cementing its own power in a sea of manufactured hatred. For our number 4 spot, we're heading to Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria. Nigeria is a fascinating and honestly tragic case because it's a country almost evenly divided between a predominantly Muslim north and a predominantly Christian south. And you might think that this would lead to a healthy, secular balance of power. You would, of course, be spectacularly wrong. Instead, political and religious leaders on both sides have become, experts at using faith to manipulate their respective poor communities. In Nigeria, religion is a powerful tool for mobilization in a country with weak national identity and strong ethnic and regional loyalties. In the north, politicians often use their Islamic faith to rally support, promising to uphold Sharia law and protect Muslim interests. This has led to the rise of extremist groups like Boko Haram, which was born out of a climate of poverty, government neglect, and radical preaching. The government's response has often been clumsy and, frankly, brutal, further alienating the poor and pushing them towards extremism. Meanwhile, in the south, you have the rise of megachurches and celebrity pastors who preach a prosperity gospel. This is the insidious belief that financial wealth is a sign of God's favor, and that if you donate generously to the church, and by extension to the pastor's lavish lifestyle, God will reward you with riches. For people living in extreme poverty, this is an incredibly seductive message. It turns religion into a lottery ticket, a desperate gamble for a miracle. These powerful religious leaders, both Muslim and Christian, wield immense political influence. They can deliver huge blocks of votes, so politicians flock to them, seeking endorsements and legitimacy. The result is a system where politics is not about policy or competence, but about which candidate can perform their faith most convincingly to their target demographic. The poor are encouraged to vote along religious lines, rather than based on which candidate might actually build a school or a hospital in their community. This dynamic creates a perpetual cycle of division and corruption. Leaders on both sides can plunder the nation's vast oil wealth with impunity, because as long as they throw some scraps to their religious constituents and loudly proclaim their piety, their base will defend them. The poor are pitted against each other in a holy war over crumbs, while the elite, both Christian and Muslim, get rich. In Nigeria, religion is the ultimate distraction, the perfect cover for a kleptocracy that serves no one but itself. Climbing into the top 3, we have Russia, a country that has performed a truly breathtaking spiritual U-turn. After decades of state-enforced atheism under the Soviet Union, Russia has now embraced the Orthodox Church as a cornerstone of its national identity and a key pillar of state power. This isn't a grassroots religious revival. It's a calculated political project orchestrated from the very top by Vladimir Putin. The alliance between the Kremlin and the Russian Orthodox Church is a marriage of convenience, or what the church calls. The state gets a powerful ideological tool, a way to legitimize its authority and project an image of Russia as a bastion of traditional conservative values against a supposedly decadent and godless West. The church, in return, gets its property back, immense wealth, and a privileged position at the heart of Russian society. It's a fantastic deal for both of them. For the Russian people, especially the poor, not so much. This state-sanctioned religion is used to promote a specific brand of nationalism. It teaches that to be a true Russian is to be orthodox. It glorifies submission to authority, both spiritual and temporal, as a virtue. The church preaches a message of social conservatism, railing against LGBTQ+ rights and feminism, which serves the Kremlin's goal of creating a unified, socially conservative populace that is resistant to Western liberal ideas. For the poor, especially in rural areas, the local priest is often a more trusted source of information than the media, and that priest's message comes straight from the Patriarch in Moscow, who in turn gets his talking points from the Kremlin. This alliance reaches the bottom of the invasion. Patriarch Kirill He has described it as a metaphysical struggle against the forces of evil, and has told Russian soldiers that dying in Ukraine will wash away all their sins. This is the state using the church to provide total justification for a brutal war in Russia, telling poor young men from Vatican and Patriarch that they are sacred to die in Ukraine. In Russia, the church has effectively committed partnering covenant. Suffering is noble, that their obedience is holy, and that the state's enemies are God's enemies. It is the complete and total subservience of faith to power, a chilling example of how religion can be hollowed out and worn as a mask by an authoritarian regime. Our runner-up at number 2 might be a surprise to some of you, but it absolutely shouldn't be. We're talking about the United States of America. Now, America has a constitutional separation of church and state. But let's be honest, that wall of separation has more holes in it than a block of Swiss cheese that's been used for target practice. For decades, the Republican Party has masterfully cultivated an alliance with a specific, highly political wing of evangelical Christianity. This isn't about all Christians or even all evangelicals. It's about a political movement that has fused a conservative interpretation of Christianity with a right-wing political agenda. The strategy is to convince a specific demographic, including many low-income white voters in rural and post-industrial areas, that their economic anxieties are secondary to a larger culture war. The message is simple and powerful. Yes, the factory closed down and your healthcare costs a fortune, but the real threat is secularism, abortion, and gay marriage. We are the party that will defend your Christian values. This is manipulation of the highest order. It takes people who have been economically devastated by policies, deregulation, tax cuts for the wealthy, anti-union measures, often championed by the very same politicians, and convinces them to vote against their own economic interests. It's a brilliant sleight of hand. You distract them with a moral panic about what's being taught in schools or who's using which bathroom, while you pick their pockets. Politicians use religious language not as an expression of genuine faith, but as a cultural signifier, a shibboleth to prove they are part of the tribe. They attend prayer breakfasts, speak at Christian universities, and pepper their speeches with biblical references, all to signal their allegiance. This creates a powerful bond with voters who feel left behind by a changing world. It gives them a sense of cultural identity and moral purpose, even as their material conditions worsen. The consequences of this are profound. Single-issue voting, particularly on abortion, has led millions of low-income voters to support candidates who then go on to slash social safety nets, food stamps, and healthcare programs that those same voters rely on. It's a tragic paradox. In the name of protecting the unborn, they vote for politicians who seem to have very little concern for children once they are actually born, especially if they're born poor. It is a cynical and incredibly effective strategy that has reshaped American politics, and for that, the good old USA comfortably takes our number 2 spot. And here we are, the number 1 spot on our countdown of governments using religion to manipulate the poor. And the winner, or perhaps loser, depending on your perspective, is Egypt. Under the authoritarian rule of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Egypt has perfected the art of using establishment Islam as a tool of absolute control, a process that began long before him, but has been refined to a terrifying degree. The Egyptian state exercises near-total control over religion. The government appoints the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the most prestigious seat of learning in the Sunni Muslim world, as well as the Grand Mufti. It dictates the topic for every Friday sermon in every mosque across the country. This gives the regime a direct pipeline into the spiritual lives of its citizens. The message that is consistently pumped through this state-controlled religious apparatus is one obedience to the ruler is a religious duty. For the tens of millions of Egyptians living in poverty, this is an inescapable message. When they go to the mosque for spiritual solace, they are told by a state-approved cleric that protesting against the government's disastrous economic policies is, or sedition, a grave sin in Islam. They are told that their suffering is a test from God and that they must be patient and trust in their leader, the pious General-turned-President Sisi, who is portrayed as a savior of the nation from the chaos of extremism. This creates a suffocating environment. The regime has brutally crushed all forms of opposition, most notably the Muslim Brotherhood, which it has labeled a terrorist organization. But it doesn't just stop there. It has also co-opted the very language of Islam to make its own rule seem divinely sanctioned. Sisi frequently peppers his speeches with religious references, casting himself as a humble, God-fearing leader burdened with the heavy task of ruling Egypt. It's a performance, but a deadly effective one. This allows the regime to pursue policies that have plunged millions deeper into poverty, all while deflecting blame. Massive vanity infrastructure projects are undertaken while the public education and healthcare systems crumble. The military, which controls a vast portion of the economy, operates with zero transparency. But any criticism is silenced, not just with force, but with the charge of impiety. In Egypt, the state has not just allied with religion, it has absorbed it. It has turned Islam into a branch of the security services, ensuring that the poor are controlled not just in the streets, but in their hearts and minds. It is the ultimate fusion of the truncheon and the minaret, and it is our number 1 example of religion being used to manipulate the poor. So there you have it. 10 countries, 10 different faiths, one depressingly similar story. From theocratic Iran to supposedly secular America, the playbook is clear. When leaders want to maintain power and entrench inequality, one of the most potent weapons in their arsenal is faith. They take something that gives people meaning, comfort, and a sense of community, and they twist it into a tool of control. They create a divine justification for earthly injustice, telling the poor that their suffering is a test, their obedience a virtue, and their anger a sin. The danger here is immense, and it goes beyond just bad policy. This manipulation hollows out faith itself, turning it from a source of spiritual liberation into a cage. It breeds cynicism, fosters division, and creates a society where critical thinking is branded as heresy. It allows corruption to fester under a cloak of piety and violence to be committed in the name of God. It convinces people to vote against their own interests, to fight their neighbors instead of their oppressors, and to accept their lot in life as a matter of divine will rather than political choice. So what can we do? The first step is to see it for what it is. Be aware. When a politician starts talking more about God than about their policies for job creation or healthcare, be skeptical. When a government tells you that a certain group of people is a threat to your faith, ask who really benefits from that division. Stay informed, read from diverse sources, and most importantly, question authority, whether it's wearing a crown, a suit, or a clerical robe. Because the moment we stop questioning is the moment they win. Thank you for watching. Good night.